And just fire away.
I love it. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking a minute after the show today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you for being, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into your story, I love it. I want to know this. 5 years ago, this pandemic changed so many things for all of us. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
You know, I was in California during the pandemic. I was in the Palm Springs area, and I wasn't full-time real estate yet. And so, I had invested in some retail stores. And so I was more of a passive investor in some retail stores, and they ended up selling to Circle K. And so that's what we did. Palm Springs was kind of lax on the whole shutdown. It wasn't like LA.
Yeah.
And so Palm Springs was different. I was fortunate to where I was. And so after I did that and Circle K bought the stores, that's when I relocated to Oklahoma and really got focused on and real estate. I've been buying real estate, not knowing what I was doing, making mistakes along the way ever since like I got my first property in 96. And so I just been buying them, not knowing what to buy, not knowing my zone, not knowing what I'm doing. But when I finally moved to Oklahoma is when I really focused full time and perfected my method, what I'm doing now, and really been doing this hardcore for about the last four solid years here.
So, if I was to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day and one of the kids wanted to know what you do for a living, how do you answer them?
The short answer is I'm a real estate investor. I teach people. I mean, other than myself doing it, I'm also teaching people to do it. But technically, I consider myself a project manager now because what I do, my method is the no money method.
Yeah.
And so I teach people how they can buy real estate without having to have, their own capital, a large down payment, or any of the things that, traditionally we believe we need. But the reason I call myself a project manager is because I find the property and then I find the pieces to acquire it. And then I see it all the way through, whether it's renovating it to flip it or, adding the value of whatever needed. And we're going to buy and hold it and keep it as rentals. And so I find it, I put the pieces together to purchase it, and then I see it through to completion. And so that's why I technically consider myself a project manager.
So, what did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was your dream job?
I 12 years old, probably a pilot at that age,
Yeah.
and I've almost finished my pilot license. I started doing it in during COVID. I thought I need to do something. Let me do this. I called the local airline, the flight school, and they're like, "Yeah, we're open." So during COVID, and I got to the point where I'm flying solo, and but once I moved out of California, that's all been put on hold. So I need to get that again. But probably 12, that was probably what I was looking forward to.
So, what was it about growing up? Where were you born and raised?
I was in Detroit, Michigan,
Detroit.
the inner
Okay.
city of Detroit, Detroit Public Schools.
Okay. So, what was it about your upbringing that gave you the backbone for the success to get into real estate, to help people understand how they can do it themselves? What were all these seeds that were planted?
Sure. Well, Detroit, where I grew up, it was very, impoverished, a lot of poverty. I grew up with a single mother on welfare. Like I said, the Detroit public school system. So, I had a big drive in me that I wanted to do better. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to get outside of that type of environment or income level. I didn't have any examples around me. I didn't know anybody that owned their own home. And so I didn't know what passive income was. None of that was taught to me. So, I struggled through the years trying to find my path, not knowing what it was going to be. I always knew real estate was something to be part of. I didn't know how. I didn't know any of the ins and outs or the whys of it. But, everyone knows, buy real estate, buy real estate. And so that's what I was trying to do along the way. But, I made a lot of mistakes. I lost a lot of money. And when I finally nailed it, when I finally got this all down, after you know, 20 years of mistakes, and you learn what not to do, but you also learn what to do. And that's what, that's what I'm doing now. And so with that, I know a lot of people that still in where I'm from, still struggling, still living paycheck to paycheck. And one of the things that really made this click in me and made me really focus and fine tune this was I knew somebody that was in retirement and they were on a fixed income. And I watched how they lived and how they had to budget. And they had to budget their expenses, their utilities and everything, so they'd have enough that would go toward their budget of their food. And so, I was getting close to retirement, and I didn't work somewhere where I was retiring with a pension. I didn't really have any of that. So I was faced on it looking at a fixed income myself. And I'm like, I can't do that. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, I need to do something. And that's when I really started laying it out what I'm going to do for my retirement and getting into apartments and buying and holding. And I set a number in my head. I said, okay, well, my first thing was just to replace my W-2, my regular income, with my rental income now. And then after that, I've set like tiers of what I'm trying to shoot for my retirement. And so, and so that was what really made me focus on doing it. But I know a lot of people that are facing that, and that's where the helping side came in. I wanted to tell them because we're all strapped with these beliefs that we need this. You can't buy property without having any money. You can't buy property without having perfect credit. And that prevented me most of my life from doing it. And I know it's preventing others. And so that was where the big push came from to help people.
So who's been that inspirational force for you to find the success, to find what your true role is, and to get a handle on all of this?
I've had a big internal driving force of what I've wanted to do and just, and succeed. I've been a single parent myself, raising my son, and I moved. That's why we moved to California. I wanted to get him out of Detroit and give him some more possibilities and stuff in his life. And so that success for my family was a big deal. I wanted to be able to help my mother because my mother was one that I had seen on a fixed income. And then I wanted to show my son that there's, we can do this. My mother always instilled in me, you can be anything you want. I give her all the credit for instilling in me that, if you're shooting out to be the president, you can do it. Just go make it happen. And so she instilled in me a lot of that belief that if I want it, I can go and do it. And so I give her credit for a lot of that. And then also, me, I was a single parent early. My son, when my son was born when I was 20. And so, going through my 20s and all that, I was a parent. And so I wanted to be able to give him more than like what I did when I was younger. And so a lot of it was for that.
So when you finally did get that big paycheck, what was the first thing you bought? What'd you go out and really want and you got it?
You know, a watch.
Nice.
It was a watch. I had already had a nice car before that. Growing up in Detroit and not having any money, I always seen other people that had the nice bicycles and I didn't have it. And I always saw other people that had things that I didn't have. But I got into a sales profession. I was going out and doing sales, and I would, especially when I got to Palm Springs, and I was doing sales there, and I came to people's homes, and the two instances that are clear in my mind. One, I went to someone's home that had a Bentley, and it was sitting in their garage, and it was just dusted over, and I just couldn't believe it. And they're like, yeah, we don't drive it much. I complimented their car. It's like, beautiful car. And they're like, yeah, we don't ever drive it much. And I was like, okay. And so I had another woman. I got it going through her house. I sold construction in Palm Springs. And so I was going at this other woman's home and we're walking through her garage and there's this Lamborghini sitting there and it's all dusted over. And I was like, beautiful car. And she's like, yeah, that's my son's. He doesn't really ever drive it. And I was in my mind, I'm thinking, if I ever get the opportunity to get a car like that, I'm going to
Yeah.
drive the wheels off of it. It's never going to have time to get dust on it. And so, I was able to when I invested in the stores and everything, and it did okay there. I had a nice car during that time. And so when I got some money, I just bought myself a watch and took a vacation. That was about it. Other
Yeah.
than that, I've been focused on reinvesting and doing something with it. I'd made enough mistakes, Joe, that by this time, because I didn't get my first $1 million until I was 50.
Yeah.
So I made enough mistakes and struggles. Once I finally got a little money, I was kind of focused to really trying to make something out of it.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking about the cars, I just keep thinking about Cameron and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that diatribe at the end where he was like, this guy doesn't even drive these cars. And then he
Yeah,
hits that hood and that
yeah,
thing flies out. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
but there's a lot of people that are like that. It's just kind of this vanity thing. But yeah, I'm thinking because I'm not a car guy, but if I had a car like that, I'd be like
yeah.
those two dudes that were hopping over that hill whenever they were driving it,
Right.
just get out there and do it. Like I'll see a
Yeah,
vet go by me and they're just going slower than I am. And I'm like, man, I'd be going out on a road and I would be pushing that thing to the limits.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you would consider somebody that would be in your real estate world or somebody that's a leader or an entrepreneur and you could hang out, have a lunch and talk to them, who would you love to meet and talk to?
They're friends. There's two of them. Either one would be fine with me, but they're friends. They actually invest and work together. And he's been a big influence in what I've been doing on the real estate side. I watched every video he had. I bought every book he had before I ever really started doing what I'm doing, properly. And that's Ken McElroy.
Yeah.
And he has a teaching called infinite returns, how you can be in these properties, they're cash flowing, you don't have any cash in it. So you're just getting money now. You've gotten all your money out of it. And you're just now, it's just paying you and having no money in the deal, but it's steady, just infinitely, steady paying you. And Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Poor Dad author.
Yeah.
They're friends and they invest together. And either of those two would be amazing to meet and be able to pick their brain and learn anything more than I already have from them would be amazing.
So, doing this for a while and getting to this point um, in your life, making your million at 50, what changes have you seen that has helped you get to this point? Have there been market forces changing, or has it been you that's evolved to this point where you finally understand how this works?
I have to say, I mean, obviously, I'm not doing it during the crash that we experienced. So I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some market factor as well. But, it was a lot of it is myself not steady, just going blindly at what I'm doing, actually, having learned how to do things properly and just aligning myself with now knowing what I'm doing and being focused doing it. I was all over the place. When I first came to Oklahoma, I still had invested in some retail stores, some convenience stores, and I thought, but I was spread too thin. I had the one and I had the other location already secured, and I was going to do the build out on that. And before I started doing the build out, I pulled the plug on it. And then I pulled the plug on the second one. I said, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing it well. I'm not going to spread everywhere, and I'm just staying focused in my zone. And that's when it's really been taken off well.
So, what is it that gets you up every day? When that alarm clock goes off, your feet hit the ground. What motivates you to do this at a high level and to also take care of your family and your own soul?
At first, and I've said this many times before. At first, I was chasing money and I didn't know why. I just knew I never had it and I wanted it. And, the struggles and stuff that I had. When my mother was on welfare, when my parents were together, my father worked for Chrysler. We were okay. We were just a middle class family. Everything was fine. But when he left, my mother was on her own with my brother and I. And so she put herself through school. I give her a lot of credit. There's a lot of options or different ways she could have went, but she didn't. She put herself through school. She had to get on welfare. And there was times where we had to go to the church pantry to get food, and there was one of the girls that I was in Sunday school with, I heard her saying, as we were taking food out of there, I heard her saying, look, mommy, they're taking the food that we brought here. And so, stuff like that kind of stuck with me. And I'm like, I don't ever want my son to experience those. And so I had a big drive to do that, but I didn't know why. I mean, other than that, I just chased money. But as I finally got there, And I know so many people where I'm from are just struggling and accepting the struggle. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They may not be making full ends meet. They know they're going into retirement that's going to be on a fixed income. They're going to live less than they currently are. That helping them try to overcome those beliefs that's preventing them or holding them back, that's been a big driving force. I've written a book, and at first I was just trying to coach people over the phone. You can do it, you can do it. But then I wrote a book and I was like, I'm really writing this to a younger me. If I'd have had this book, I could have saved myself so much, had my focus and known what I was doing 20 years or 30 years ago. And so I've really been now getting on podcasts, writing the book, doing what I'm doing. That's what I get up for every day. And that's for helping people because that's so much more rewarding. It's so seeing other people get their first property. I know that I just did more than help him. I've helped his kids. Now, they're going to think differently and it's going to go on and go on. So that's what really drives me now.
I think when you get older, when you look at the generational good that can be created, because it would have affected you if someone generationally before you would have done it. It would have
Yeah,
given you that mindset that you had to struggle to figure out for so long. You know,
sure, exactly.
there's so
Yeah.
many dividends. So let me ask you this. Speaking of the young version of you, let's say you have a
Yeah.
dream tonight. You walk into that boyhood home in Detroit and you have a coffee table book in your hands and it's your life and you hand it to that young version. Is that young
Yeah.
version of you going to believe that this is the way that your life turned out?
No, no. I was lost. I went through a lot. I was lost, but I just knew I wanted better. I just didn't know how. My brother made fun of me one time. My brother followed my father's path. He went into Chrysler and coming out of Detroit, that was kind of if you got into the big three, you kind of made it. You're going to work and to get your pension and great. You'll be able to have the middle class life, buy your home. But that was never interesting to me.
Yeah.
I always wanted more than that. I was always shooting for the stars. I was just, shooting very broadly, but I one time called my brother. I had just gotten this new job. I was excited about it. I was like, hey, tell him about the new job. And then he said, "To what? Till someone, pisses you off and then you quit and you want to go somewhere else." And I said, "Hey, listen." I said, what is better? You're going to stay somewhere for what, you're 10, 15, continue, and you're going to go up incrementally, or I go from one job to the other job, but I keep going up incrementally, increasing my, what I'm bringing home, my salary. Why are you saying one's better than the other? Because your path is that, but as long as I'm still increasing what I'm doing, how are you going to tell me I'm doing it wrong?
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know. I just went from whatever job I got into sales, thankfully, but that just gives you the power that you can just you can go sell anything. So I've sold construction, I've sold investments for movies, I've sold for Cadillac, I've sold cars, I've sold whatever.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you were to go into a room of everybody that's known you throughout your career in a business sense, and you
Yeah.
walk to a podium and you could tell them a fun story that would humanize you a little bit to that room. First concert you went to, an amazing trip you took, a wonderful place, jumping out of an airplane, a big risk that you took. What would be a fun story that you would tell that room?
One of my first flying trips, just oh my I really question if I was prepared for this or not. I mean, I've always been looked at as like a strong character. I'm pretty, like hardened and come out of the inner city of Detroit. And so everyone that's around me knows kind of this hardened side of Dave. But when I came home from that, the person that was near me there, they told me they said you're visibly disturbed. And I said, well, yes, I am. Yes, I am. Because I was taken off. Okay, first I ordered some books to learn flying during COVID. And I thought I was going to do all the book work. And then after, I would then take the actual flying
Uh-huh.
courses after I learned what I needed and got familiar. But I called the local school and I just wondered because I've never been in a small plane. let me see what this feels like. So I called him to see if I could take a test flight. And I thought I was just going to ride in the passenger seat and just go up and kind of get a feel for it. But that's no. You're flying from the very first day. You get the, the yoke and you're flying from day one. Well, one of my early flights, number the second or third time, I was taking off and in Palm Springs, it's big windy area. I mean, a lot of windmills are there, so it's a really high, big high wind area. And I was taking off in that plane, and I got hit by this wind, and it turned the plane sideways. And I let go. I let go. I didn't know what to do. I was like, whoa. And obviously the instructor was there and he knew he's used to it. And he just started laughing. He's like, great, isn't it? And I just couldn't fly anymore. I just let go, and it was funny. It was really funny.
That's
So I
awesome.
mean, it's hard not to know when you're not there. But when that plane went sideways, I didn't know what to do. And letting go is obviously not the thing you're supposed to do. But
Yeah.
that's what the first I just let go. I couldn't believe it.
Oh,
So
wow. That's
yeah,
wild.
yeah, yeah. It
Yeah,
was
my
fun.
my son is on the spectrum and they have this program called Challenge Air. So it's all these
Okay.
pilots that donate their time and their twin engine Cessnas, all these planes. And every time we go up, I'm always honed in on what they explain to us and how
Yeah,
they explain if things go sideways, what to do. And this year
yeah,
was the most interesting because he was like, if you see planes around us, let me know. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, dude, I'm just a guy here with my son trying to sit the airplane. I don't
yeah,
know, but I
yeah,
was really paying attention. But it is
yeah,
interesting because you try to suppress all that, but there's a reality. Things happen all the time, man,
yeah,
on a
yeah,
dime, and you just
yeah,
don't know. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's a wild world up there. So let me ask you this: of everything that you've done in your life, all of the successes, all of the evolution, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Now, well, one. I joke with my son all the time. I told him, I said, kid, you justified my path. I said, your outcomes have kind of made me look good, so I'll ride on that. So, he's done really well. Moving him out of Detroit was the best thing I could have done for him. He's since got his undergrad at USC. He's went out and did his master's at Pepperdine, and he's doing great. And he's a first generation college student, but he's beyond that. He's actually a first generation high school graduate.
Wow,
No one else in his family, his mother, his father, and beyond that, my mother, my father, his grandparents, nobody ever graduated high school.
wow,
And so he was the first generation high school graduate and then went on and got his master's degree and right now talking to UC Davis about getting his PhD. So,
wow.
I have to say I'll take a little credit there, but I mean, I give him most of it. He's done it. He's pushed himself and did all that. But now, really, is helping other people achieve things that they had written off. They didn't ever think that they would have had home ownership, real estate investments, and now they do. And now they're looking for the next property and the next. And so that's one of the stuff and what's up ahead because I just plan to help many more people now.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, David. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that gets your book, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What is your
Yeah.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I'm driven. I'm driven. I'm really focused, and I really have been. I've been pushing myself. I moved out really early. I've lived on my own since I've been 16 years old. So, my mother even asked, "Where did you come from?" But I've been really driven and persistent, and I try to stay focused on what I'm after, and really, I mean, that's the best thing I could really say about myself is I'm really driven and focused on what I'm doing. If there's something I want, I go after it. I get it.
So what do you like the best about living in Tulsa and what do you miss about growing up in Detroit?
What I miss about Detroit is my friends.
Yeah.
I've learned at first you don't realize it, but when I moved from Detroit and I moved to Palm Springs, I just left everybody I knew for the first 30 years of my life. Growing up from kindergarten and all of that, my real core group of friends. And then, I was focused in Palm Springs trying to make stuff happen for raising my son and doing that. And then I moved again after being in Palm Springs for 20 years. And so now I'm in Oklahoma, I'm 50 years old, and you just, those friends that you've created, that doesn't happen easily when you're 50. It doesn't. It
Yeah.
just, now anyone you're meeting, they have family. They have children they're raising, they're doing their thing. It's not the same as when you're in your 30s or your
Yeah.
20s or, in school. So from Detroit, that's what I miss the most,
Yeah.
my friends. And what I like about Oklahoma, and I don't know, I never thought I'd be in Oklahoma. It was never on my radar. I was
Yeah.
like, not a state I ever considered. But the people here are amazing.
Yeah.
And when I first visited here, the friendliness stood out to me because Detroit, it's not that way. I mean, there was a instance that I went one time. I had someone with me from California. We were in Detroit trying to rent a car, and it seemed like the person renting the car actually wanted to fight us.
Wow.
And so it's just very aggressive in Detroit. I mean, I remember when Detroit got their first Whole Foods, and I
Yeah.
was visiting from California, and I set my cart up on the because in Palm Springs in the Whole Foods there, you have your little hand cart and you can set it up and they'll just take stuff out your basket and finish your bagging you up and bringing you up. I went to Detroit and I set my basket up on there and the guy kind of commanded me to take your stuff out the cart. And I said, okay. I said, a little different here. Then he said, what do you mean? I said, well, first, it seems like you want to fight me. I said, that's the first thing that I mean.
Yeah.
I said, so
Yeah.
that was Detroit, and California is not very friendly like that either. But
Yeah.
when you come to Oklahoma, I mean, the friendliness here is amazing, and
Yeah.
that's what stood out to me. I really like it. I plan to be here now. I like it here.
Everybody says that from the coast. When they come to the Midwest, they say it
Yeah,
about Kansas City. I've talked to people that came here from LA and they're like, what is it about you guys? Where we're from, no one talks, no one looks at you. You guys are
yeah,
all ready to talk about the last 5 years of your life.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
wild. It's good.
yeah.
So if
Mhm.
anybody wants to reach out, they want to get your book, they want to ask you questions, hire you, any of the good business, where do they go?
Sure. Well, I've written a book called The No Money Millionaire. How to build wealth through real estate without using a dime of your own money. And that's at nomoneymillionaire.com. Right now, to any of your listeners, I'm giving it away as a free download. So go to nomoneymillionaire.com and you can get the free book right there. And if you want to find me, I'm at No Money Millionaire everywhere. You can Google me, YouTube, Facebook, all No Money Millionaire, and you'll be able to find me.
Okay, wonderful. David, this has been a joy, man. So great to meet you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking time out today. Best of luck.
I appreciate the platform. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.